Good afternoon and welcome to the first session of the Operational Network Security Training Program, which will start very soon. And in a second, I will hand over to Klaus Müller, who will be presenter for today. We have quite an extensive agenda for this session. If you have not yet registered for other sessions in this part of the training program, please do so, and I have posted the link in the chat room, or check out Giant Learning Development website, please. And also please take note of the more days for your diary, as the program will continue into September, and we'll have some sessions in September, November, and it will be completed on the 19th of February 2021. And now, without further ado, let me hand over to Klaus. Thank you.
Thank you for introducing me, Irina, and very warm welcome from my side. So yeah, let's start with the presentation and the screen sharing. I hope everybody can hear me. So yes, the topic for today is operating system telemetry, configuring the privacy protection in Windows 10. So we all have most likely been using Windows for quite some time, and Windows 10 is out for now in the 5th year, I think. And there have been some changes with the way of how the operating system is marketed and maintained by Microsoft. And the first change was that Microsoft is now selling Windows as a service, which means basically that there will be rolling updates twice a year in spring and fall. And this means these rolling updates will replace service packs, and there will be probably no Windows 11, but ever more updates of Windows 10. The primary business then for Microsoft is that they sale of services, Office 365, OneDrive, games, apps, etc. And of course, Windows 10 is still not for free. It still costs a bit of money. And an additional stream of revenue now is advertising. This wasn't present in Windows before, but Microsoft goes along the line of Apple, Google, and other companies, and wants to sell advertising besides other things. And this means also that they do a lot of tracking with it. So, and when we talk about Windows 10, I will mostly refer to the Enterprise Edition, and what is told about the Enterprise Edition will to almost 100% also hold true for the education version. It holds true for a lesser degree to the Pro version, and there are quite a few features missing from the home version. But I think in the official use in your organization, most of you will use Enterprise or Educational. So, and what can be said about Windows 10 is that it is not really privacy by design or privacy by default. So, and this means there have been, right from the beginning, quite a few concerns with regards to privacy protection. There is a tracking of users, especially for the advertising, which raises privacy concerns. And then there is quite a bit of telemetry that is taken from the operating systems and the application. And this means that sensitive or personal information will be transferred to Microsoft, who maintains most of its servers outside the European Union, and it is subject to a lot of legislation from the American government to give over information to law enforcement and secret services. It is, at least in the beginning, it was not transparent what was tracked at all and why it is tracked and where it is transferred to. This has improved a bit, but it's still a bit of murky. And from a professional point of view, the organization, meaning your NRAN or your university or whatever, is the data controller with regards to European privacy legislation, and is therefore legally responsible for the transmission of data. And the guiding question, at least here in Germany, was, can we use Windows 10 in public administration? And until this month, this was a thing that most agencies said, yes, but we have to turn down or turn off a lot of the tracking and telemetry functionality. And in 2 weeks ago or so, the European Union Court of Justice has, in a ruling against Facebook, practically voided the Privacy Shield agreement between the European Union and the United States, which means that we currently are not allowed to legally transfer personal data to organizations outside the European Union, especially not the US. It's quite not clear what this means in detail, so I'm very cautious with the current parts, and I'm not a legal expert anyway. So my current assumption is that it's probably not possible anymore, but we'll have to see how things develop. So the scope of this presentation is mostly about PCs and laptops used in the offices of universities or NRANs or administration workstations. And with regards to the Windows 10 version, I'll have tested this on Windows Enterprise version 1909, which is the version from fall last year. Version 2004 is out, and most of you will probably already have deployed it, but there have been very little changes with regards to this. I think that's only one point that is relevant to this presentation. So what are the problem fields, at least the most important ones? The first one is Cortana. Then we will talk about the web search functions, the advertising ideas, the Windows Update functions, the Microsoft accounts, and the biggest part is the telemetry. There have also been issues with the tracking and transferring of wireless LAN passwords in the past. This was called Wi-Fi Sense by Microsoft and was meant to share your home wireless LAN passwords. And this function has been disabled since the mid of 2016 update, for at least for the encrypted wireless LANs. So the first part is Cortana. What is Cortana? If you haven't heard it already, it's a virtual assistant, which is practically a voice interface to a lot of functionality within Windows. The search function, the note function, and some more things like Cortana, fix me an appointment at 1600, or look up some information for me. And in this way, it behaves very much like Hey Google or Siri on Apple devices or Alexa on Amazon. There is also a version of Cortana available for Android, so if you want to sync with it, you need a Microsoft account, but you can still use it. The problem with Cortana is that it depends on voice recognition, and to improve that voice recognition function, Microsoft analyzes voice samples. And that means if we have Cortana enabled, we have practically a permanent bug in our office, and that may leak personal or sensitive or confidential information outside organizations. So, and second, the Cortana interface allows us to issue certain voice commands even when the screen is locked or the and this means we have a all-time tracking of voice activity in our rooms. So from a privacy perspective, I think there's no alternative but to deactivate this function. So the most convenient way to do this is to use the group policy editor, which is present on all Windows versions except Home. And we can go to Computer Configuration, Administrative Templates, Windows Components, Search, and the point is Allow Cortana, and set this to Disable. And then roll it out to our devices. On the Home version, where we don't have the group policy editor, we can still use the registry editor. I'm not reading aloud the registry keys. We will make available the slides for you. But in fact, that's all we have to do to disable Cortana. So there's a minor point about Cortana, that is that it shows your email address on the lock screen when we use a Microsoft account with our Windows version. So, and this is under your privacy settings, show account details such as my email address. And of course, if I have locked screens in a public accessible space, we would probably want to turn this off. So then there is the taskbar web search feature. What is it? It is simply a small search bar built into the taskbar of Windows 10. It behaves practically like your search bar or your combined address and search bar on your browser. So you start typing things into it and it gives you some completions, and you can also use the Windows and S keys to bring up these little windows. And the problem here is, again, it is an incremental web search. So as you type, it sends already the search term to the search engine. Here in this case, it's the Bing search engine from Microsoft. And behind the scenes, there is the Microsoft Edge browser working on it. So, and this means we have the problem that Microsoft will do, of course, tracking for advertising and profiling through its search engine. And the downside is that we can't, unlike in browsers, change this search engine or browser engine. So we always end up with Edge or Bing. So we can't use, say, DuckDuckGo or any other more privacy-friendly search engine. Again, this means we have to deactivate that feature. It doesn't mean that local searching will no longer work. It's just the web search that will be turned off here. So we can either turn it off in a registry or block it in the local firewall. There's a bit of a problem with the registry keys because Microsoft now and then changes these with the Windows 10 feature upgrades. And this has happened with the April release of 2020. And so that means every now and then we have to go through this and see after a feature upgrade if the key for this is still the same. So on another way, we can turn this off in the personal firewall, which can be done either by a PowerShell command, a NetShell command, sorry, or through the graphical user interface of the Windows firewall. So then there is the third topic, the advertising ID. This is simply a cross-device tracking of users through Microsoft and to facilitate more tailored advertising. Yes, I don't think that we need this in official systems or laptops. So the recommendation here is to deactivate it. This can be done in the privacy settings GUI on Windows 10, and what we should probably leave on is the language access so that you can have web pages displayed in your local language. And again, there is some additional advertising on the lock screen, which is here named Get Fun Facts, Tips, Tricks, and More on your lock screen, which we should probably turn off also. Next topic is the speech and inking features. The online speech recognition is not only limited to Cortana, but also built into Windows itself. And this too uploads voice samples to the Microsoft Cloud. I think Cortana and the Windows Dictation app needs this function. And yes, we should, for the same reasons as Cortana, probably disable this function, but there may be people that depend, for example, on the Dictation app. Think of people with disabilities. So when we try to turn this off generally, be prepared to make some exceptions. The same is basically the inking and typing feature, which is the handwriting recognition of Microsoft Windows. And it too uploads handwriting samples to the Microsoft Cloud. And again, for the same reasons as voice recognition, we don't want to do this. If we turn this off, the local handwriting app still works, but the improvement of or tailoring of your handwriting may not be as good as you used to be. So we can certainly turn this off if we don't have any handwriting hardware on our PCs or laptops, so we don't have a touch screen or graphic tablet. It may be a bit different if we use this on tablets or mobile phones. So then there is something that has not directly to do with tracking and advertising, but still needs to be mentioned here. This is a Windows update, and it has often been mentioned in the media. One of the things that we can't do anymore is we can't completely turn off Windows Update. We can only delay updates. The feature upgrades can be held up back to 1 year, and the normal quality updates, which are the security updates we get every month on the second Tuesday, Wednesday, can be held back up to 1 month. The downside with the feature upgrades is that Microsoft tends to reset the privacy settings with it. So every time we have feature upgrades, we have to check them again and be prepared to deal with the changes Microsoft has made, like, say, disabling web search. And on the security update side, well, I think this is a bit critical that we patch them as fast as we can. But of course, this being a very widely distributed operating system, there may be some patches that do not work as intended or breaks things. So if you really need the stability, you should probably wait a few days to see if Microsoft pulls back an update. So, and if we don't want to have reboots during our work hours, we can disable this in the update settings to be delayed after work hours. And there's a bit more about updates being tied to telemetry, but I come to this in the telemetry part. We have a bit more options to deal with when we run our own update server in our organization, which is probably the thing we should do. And at this time, we should also turn off the peer-to-peer distribution of updates with the clients. Again, this is something that has to be done with the group policy editor, and it is available for the enterprise and educational versions only, but it can probably be configured on the pro versions, but I'm not sure about that. So then there is something I will handle in the course of updates. It's the Windows Defender, which of course needs regular signature updates, but the Windows Defender also uploads files it thinks of being suspicious, and we don't have real control about what is being uploaded, so it's just up to Microsoft what they do here. And this means the only way we have to avoid accidentally uploading sensitive information is to turn this off, which doesn't mean that the Windows Defender will stop working. It just means that they don't upload samples for analysis to Microsoft. So again, we can do this in two ways: by registry key, which we will have to do on the home version, or by group policy objects on the other versions of Windows. So, and lastly, there is the case with the local account versus the Microsoft account. By default, when we install Windows, Microsoft wants us to have a cloud account and use this as a sort of single sign-on for all our devices. And the option to use the local account is a bit hidden on the screens, the installation screens of Microsoft Windows. And when we have no network, we can always choose the option I don't have internet. Or when we have a network, it is named domain join instead, which is a bit of a misleading here. We don't have to join a domain. We can just use a normal local account, but we can also use a local domain if we want to. Of course, this means we have a single sign-on, and we can restore our operating system license if it gets lost or we damage our hard disk. On the other hand, it makes tracking, of course, a lot easier through this account, and the account password is transferred to Microsoft in clear text, although the connection itself is encrypted, and it's done only once when we set up this account. But if we don't want Microsoft to have access to our clear text password, yeah, then we have to go with the local account. So, and this is not really something that prevents us from adding cloud account later. So we can always do that. And it has nothing to do with the usage of store or Microsoft Cloud accounts like OneDrive. We can still use these accounts, but we don't have to, and they don't have to be the same as the host account. So this brings us almost to halftime, and I think I've gone through a lot of topics so far. So maybe a short break here to have take any questions so far.
Klaus, there is a question in the chat, if you can see it. Is there an option to change privacy options in Command PowerShell? And
yes, I think so. I haven't looked this up, but there for practically every setting here, there is also a PowerShell function or applet to do this, so you can script this all the way down.
I mean, if is anyone else want to comment on this point, by all means, just unmute your mics, and probably easier to talk than put things in chat sometimes. So, Klaus, it's up to you. If there are no more questions, and you feel like to
Yes, so
continue or you
if
want to have a breather.
there are not any more questions, I think we can continue. And so, so then we go into the topic of Microsoft Windows telemetry. So what is telemetry? When we talk about this here in this context, it means we talk about system data uploaded by the connected user experience and telemetry component. Well, that's at least the official long name Microsoft has given to this. It is on the client side simply called the Universal Telemetry Client Service, which goes by the even shorter name of DiagTrack. So what does it collect? It first collects crash and usage data. So if there are application crashes on your system, this is transferred to the Microsoft cloud. Also application launches and lots of more things. It also has a function to inspect system and the operating system and the installed application, which means they tell Microsoft which hardware platform you run on, which version of the operating system you have installed, which features of the operating systems are installed, which applications and application versions are installed, and so on. And when we choose to opt in for collecting more information, it also means that Microsoft can inspect running processes. This is done by injecting libraries through the DiagTrack service into the running process to do some on-screen memory inspection. Microsoft says that they will only enable this if explicitly asked to this, and it's done by specially trained service operators. Well, I'm not sure how much of this is true, but I don't have any more information on this. And it also can directly query registry keys or look into setup logs to collect information from that point. And of course, going this deep into your activities and the memory of the running system, it basically means that they can inspect all your hard disk and even the RAM of your system. And this means sensitive or personal information is uploaded to Microsoft. And of course, the usage data is used for behavior analysis by Microsoft. So before we go into the configuration, Microsoft has added a feature that is called the Diagnostic Data Viewer, which is an app that you can use to view what data is collected on your system and transferred to Microsoft. By default, this View Diagnostic Data switch is turned off. And when we turn it on, we get redirected to a download page at the Microsoft Store, where we don't have to download this Diagnostic Data Viewer app, which requires a Microsoft account, but we can use a Microsoft Store account for that and don't have to enable a host account for this. The app itself is free of charge, and we can then later disable that account. We don't need to use it anymore. So, and then we can open the Diagnostic Data Viewer, and we have a nice XML view of the diagnostic data that is uploaded to Microsoft. As we can see, it's mostly lots and lots of XML blobs on our system, and I haven't found directly after installation any personal information, but this may of course vary if you have a production system. The downside of this viewer is that it's really only a viewer. We can't delete or filter anything. But of course, it's better than nothing. And Microsoft has also a web page for this. So we can also use that web page to see what data is uploaded. But that again requires a Microsoft account. So how is this working under the hood? We have to make a small excursus into the event tracing for Windows. That's a framework or API to build application logging. And the DirectTrack service and the older event log service depend on this. The event tracing is made up of three components: controllers, providers, and consumers. The providers are the ones that generate events, which means they are the ones that write the logs, and the consumers, on the other hand, read the events or consume the events, like however you want to name it. The consumers can also read log files, but typically the transfer of data from the providers to the consumers is done by kernel buffers, which allows real-time delivery of event logs. And then there are the controllers which manage these sessions, which means they create or delete them or activate and deactivate them, or we can add and remove providers or consumers. I won't go any deeper into this, but that's all we need to know for here. So how is the telemetry configured? First, it's done by a registry key, which is set under HKLM, Software Microsoft current version policies data collection allow telemetry, which has 4 values from 0 to 3. And the second part of this configuration is an XML file, which is downloaded from Microsoft at regular intervals. And that XML file is stored on your system at program data, Microsoft diagnosis, downloaded setting, utc.app.json. And you can view it with any ASCII editor or XML viewer, and it's a couple of hundred lines of XML codes. I've added a small snippet of this on this slide here. And there's something like provider definition, Microsoft cell system settings, blah, 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 and so on. It's basically a lot of name and UUID pairs. So the registry key, I've said, has 3 values ranging from 0, also named security, to full, which is a setting of 3. And basically, the enhanced or is the default on enterprise, and the full setting is the one on home or pro versions. And as you can see, this is quite a bit of data that is logged. There are some hundreds providers logging already on the operating system start, which is the autologger DirectTrack column here. And the DirectTrack listener, the second column, is the one that is used when we have the operating system fully started. And then we have something around 400 or so providers for event logging, which is quite a lot. The amount of data varies. Microsoft talks about 150 to 250 kilobytes per day for the basic version. It's a bit more on enhanced, and I think they have said it's about 2 megabytes on full. If we have a metered link this can be turned off. A metered link in Microsoft speech is an internet connection that we have to pay for by volume. For example, like your mobile phone tariffs. So from a privacy standpoint, of course, we would like to turn this down to level 0 security, which has quite a few listeners configured, but this is available only on the enterprise or educational version. So let me just go a little more about the telemetry from the network side of view. Of course, I've said that this data is transferred to telemetry servers by Microsoft. Most of them go by the domain of telemetrymicrosoft.com, but there are also some additional domains. Microsoft has a web page where this is all laid out, and I've added this web page in the references section of the slides. So again, these names may change with the feature upgrades, and they are also gated behind content delivery networks and load balancers. So it's region dependent on where exactly which IP address these go. The connection itself is TLS encrypted, and the certificate is pinned, which means hard-coded into the universal telemetry client. There is about one connection every 15 to 20 minutes. On metered links, Microsoft does this less often. So the local component that transfers this data is the DiagTrack listener service, which is located at Program Data Windows Diagnostics, which is a hidden folder, but that's just the hidden flag. So as an admin, you can enable this. And as I've said, there are two listeners. The autologger DiagTrack for the early boot process. Think of this a bit like Klog on Windows when the operating system boots, and the DiagTrack listener on normal operation. As you can see here, these two columns, autologger DiagTrack and DiagTrack. We can see what sessions by detail are active in the operating system through the perfmon.exe program, which is present by default on every Windows version. And when we start this, we can go to the performance monitor, go to the data collector sets, and either look at the event trace sessions when we want to look at the DiagTrack listener for the full operating system, or the startup event trace sessions, and then again the autologger DiagTrack listener, and then we can go into the trace providers and sessions and get some more detailed information. Of course, we could disable things here, but as I've said, the configuration is downloaded from Microsoft every now and then, and it wouldn't be permanent because this gets re-enabled from the cloud. So what can we do? About telemetry, we can set the telemetry level to 0. We could also deactivate the DiagTrack service completely, or we can disallow network access to the Microsoft data collection services through the local firewall, or we can manipulate the system name resolution for the Microsoft collection servers, which means we go into the etc hosts and add some bogus entries here. We could also do the last two steps on our network firewalls or DNS servers. But as you can see, the last versions have a bit of their drawbacks, and I come to this now. The options 1 and 2 are probably the ones that works best. I would strongly recommend version 1 setting this to 0. Option 2 is the only one we have on Home or Pro edition, so we might have to do this here. All the other versions are problematic because, as I've said, the IP addresses are a bit volatile. I've looked up one of these, and we've seen here the cache lifetime is about 10 seconds, which is quite normal for today's content delivery networks, but it also means that Microsoft can change this on short notice, and they may change with feature upgrades. And of course, Microsoft might opt to ignore etc hosts in the future, or hard code the IP addresses in the DirectTrack services. So this is probably something we have to spend a lot of time to keep this properly working, and we have to add scripts and cron jobs to update our firewall rules if we do this in the network firewall. So this is a bit of clunky. And even version solution 2 has its drawback. Solution 2, we remember, is turning off the DirectTrack service completely. Microsoft recommends against this. And they do so because, as we've seen, even on security settings, we have very few DirectTrack listeners which still transmit data to Microsoft. Why do they do this? Inferring from what Microsoft has said, it's because they still transfer a bit of information about which drivers and hardware is installed on your system. And Microsoft uses this data if they know that certain combinations of drivers or hardware will cause problems with Microsoft updates. They can use this to withhold updates to this problematic installations of Microsoft Windows. So if you say you have a patch has trouble with your graphic card driver, certain version of, Microsoft can hold back the delivery of a certain patch for these Windows clients. So that's the reason why there is still few services listening and transferring data. People have looked into this. Also, this has been 3 or 4 years ago, and they haven't found anything privacy relevant here, so it's probably still safe. But if you want to be absolutely sure no data gets transferred to Microsoft, yes, you may want to disable the DirectTrack service completely, but then you may run into the risk, or a certain higher risk, that Microsoft patches may break things on an update. So we have to weigh if this is what we want. Yeah, so this almost ends my short session here. As we've seen, the telemetry and data collection cannot be turned off completely, but on the other hand, from a organizations or global security perspective, this is probably not entirely bad, because even as an organization, I will probably like to tap into this data stream, which may have its values for forensics and incident response. And as I come from this part of the network operating, I am very fond of this, and it certainly allows a lot of things here. So we have to make a trade-off between what we have as a security needs, what we have from the user's privacy or the client's privacies. We have also taken into account the user's convenience, which may sound odd, but as we all know who've been a bit around this, if our users really want this, we have practically no way but to give in here. And of course, if we have support from Microsoft, we will probably have to turn it on anyway, or unless we don't want to have Microsoft support. On the other hand, of course, we have to deal with the legal issues, the general data protection legislation from the EU or your local laws. We have to deal with the contracts we have with regards to maintenance and warranties. We have to deal with our local laws in regards to, say, workspace security or privacy. So I can't give you a patent solution. And as a one last thing to say, I have only scratched the surface here. So we can have a look into the links to have some more information here. If you don't want to have to look into the ones I give you a thank you for listening, and hope to see you again on the logging and audit session on Wednesday or the next session on Friday. So here are the references. We will make available the slide deck as a PDF, so you don't have to take notes, or if the video is not good enough, we will give these all to you in plain text. Here's the ruling of the Court of Justice. And the two ones in bold are probably the two Windows pages which you should look up if you want to know more about this. And if you're really deeper into Microsoft internals or Windows internals, I will recommend the book Windows Internals by Mr. Rosinovich and Mr. Solomon, and or the Digital Privacy and Security, a practical guide by Nihat Hasan. So this ends my part here, and so it's time for some more question.
Thank you, Klaus. We do have a question. I can see it in the chat. Do the same statements apply to Windows Server versions?
Yes.
2016 and above.
Yes, everything I said about Windows Enterprise applies to Windows Server versions, but of course, situation is slightly different here because we have to probably don't have any graphics hardware on them, graphic handwriting recognition hardware.
Okay, there's a question from Burak. Well, thank you for your comment, Burak, and we're glad you've been able to attend the session. And the question is, when will the slides be available to us? Well, we can make the video available quite soon, because the version of the recording becomes available pretty quickly after the session is over. It just takes us maybe a day to do a bit of editing and upload it to the location where we can provide the link to and accessible to everyone. Klaus, how soon slides can be made available? I presume we can make it available at the same time?
Yes, of course. They will also be on the Geon GitLab, and I don't know if it's already open to the public for viewing, but if not, I will make it so.
Okay, so what we will do after the session, when the recording is complete and uploaded, then we will contact everyone who attended this session and also expressed an interest but haven't been able to attend. And we'll send all the information about all the resources available in their location and how to access them. Okay, I can see another question appearing in the chat from Johan.
Yes, I do, because I think last week Microsoft has announced a new feature for the enterprise version of Windows, which is called, I think, privacy control or something, which will allow a bit of more control with regards to what is uploaded from a domain or enterprise installation of Windows, but I haven't looked into this yet. So, and of course, with the ruling from the Court of Justice, we will have to see a lot of things more, and things have been changing at Microsoft, although only gradually, but the pressure from the European Union, especially with regards to Microsoft and public administration, has allowed things like the data viewer and a lot of information on the web pages at Microsoft to be compliant with the GDPR. So I think when we keep up the pressure, we can see further improvements from Microsoft here. Yes, Christine is answering this. Yes, we can distribute the slides to the constituents. We will also make the source of the slides available, which is in OpenOffice. So you don't have to use the PDF. So if you want to edit or expand them, you can do that.
Thank you very much. We've got like a couple of minutes left in case anyone has any further comments or questions. Please post them.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just to give a little personal touch, I decided to talk to you instead of writing.
Yes, of course, by all means, yes.
Yes, just like a comment from you. Do you think that this ruling from the European Justice Court will oblige Microsoft to review these kind of policies that we need to disable each one by one? Do you think we can expect a new version of Windows that complies with this court ruling shortly or not?
I really can't comment on that. I don't think the next version of Windows will have this.
No, of course,
not the fall update. And since the Europeans, the Court of Justice ruling has been a bit of a really big hit over the head with regards to Privacy Shield, I don't know how they will try to get around this this time. This has been invalidated once before by the Court of Justice, and they have scrambled to add a new agreement, which is, except for cosmetics changes, being the same as the ones before, and which has been, in my eyes, rightfully been turned down by the Court of Justice. But I'm really not sure how they will react this time. But yeah, I think they're really in a quandary here.
Yeah, because my question has to do with, it does not, should not be our responsibility to comply with the, of course we have to comply with the regulations, but if Microsoft is doing business in Europe, they should be the first to comply. So that was the basis of my question.
Yes.
But of course, a couple of years of appealing and lawyers involved.
Let me add one more thing here. This is not meant to be a pure Microsoft bashing. I'm not sure if Apple or Google or Amazon do not face the same issues here. Of course, let's say if you have an Amazon speaker with Alexa in your rooms, this is for the same reasons as I've said about Cortana, a no-no with regard to privacy protection in our organizations. And I think nobody has yet looked into what Google or Apple do in this regard. At least I haven't found it.
Thank you, Klaus. Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks. So I think, yeah.
Thank you, everyone. I think we just have just a minute left of the scheduled time. And thank you very much to Klaus for the presentation and for all the time and effort put into this session. And thank you very much for all the participants, for their interest and time to attend and participation. One more very short remark, because it's the first, as I mentioned, the first live online session of the whole training program, where we would like to know your opinion as to the format of the session. And also content, if there's anything else you would like to be added to or changed or in any other way. So I just posted the link in the chat room to the very short, I know how we all feel about surveys, to a very short survey. And we also circulated the link alongside all the information how to access the resources and reference materials after the session. So for my part, it's just big thank you to everyone, and hope to see you soon, either later on this week or next week, or for any other sessions of this program. Klaus, would you have any final remarks to the audience?
Except thank you for listening, and hope to see you again on Wednesday and Friday.
Okay, in that case, thank you very much, everyone. Great to have you with this afternoon, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.